In 1991, a 7-year-old girl and her father disappeared without a trace during a cross-country road trip through the Pacific Northwest, leaving behind a devastated mother and a case that would haunt investigators for nearly 3 decades. But in the spring of 2019, a highway construction crew drilling into the earth along a forgotten stretch of Route 97 made a discovery so disturbing it would force one woman to confront the possibility that some mysteries are better left buried. If you're drawn to stories of long unsolved disappearances and the dark secrets that surface when we disturb the past, subscribe now and join us as we uncover the truth behind the vanishing mile. The rain hammered against the windows of Elena Voss's cottage on Whidbey Island, a relentless percussion that had become the soundtrack of her solitary life. She sat in her reading chair, a cup of chamomile tea cooling on the side table, her eyes fixed on the framed photograph that had occupied the mantel for 28 years. Nathan smiled at the camera, his arm draped protectively around 7-year-old Iris, who beamed with gap-toothed joy. They stood beside Nathan's silver Honda Accord, packed and ready for their father-daughter adventure. It was the last photograph Elena had taken of them together. September 14, 1991, the day her family drove away and never came back. Elena had memorized every detail of that morning. The way Iris's purple backpack had been stuffed too full, how Nathan had kissed her forehead twice instead of once. The exact shade of gray. The sky had been. She had replayed it thousands of times, searching for the warning sign she must have missed. The moment when she could have stopped them from leaving, but there had been nothing. Just an ordinary Saturday morning that had opened like a trap door beneath her feet. Now at 63, Elena had built a careful life around the absence. She volunteered at the library, tended her garden, took long walks along the beach. She had learned to carry the weight of not knowing, had made peace with the probability that she would die without answers. The phone's shrill ring shattered the rain's monotony. Elena considered not answering. It was past 9 o'clock, and late calls rarely brought good news. But something instinct, intuition, the universe's cruel sense of timing made her reach for the receiver. Mrs. Voss, the voice was male, official, careful. This is Detective Marcus Porter with the Cottahs County Sheriff's Office. I'm sorry to call so late, but we need you to come to Ellensburg as soon as possible. Elena's fingers tightened around the phone. What is it? A pause. Too long. We found something, ma'am. Something we believe may be connected to your husband and daughter's disappearance. The room tilted. 28 years of silence. And now this. What did you find? Her voice sounded distant. Someone else's. I'd rather discuss the details in person. Mrs. Voss. Can someone drive you? Your sister, perhaps. Claire. Yes, Claire lived just 40 minutes away in Eville. I'll be there tomorrow. Elena heard herself say first thing in the morning. After she hung up, she sat motionless in the darkened room, the photograph still watching her from the mantel. The rain continued its assault, but Elena no longer heard it. Somewhere in the earth along a forgotten highway, the past had been disturbed, and it was clawing its way back. The Cottahs County Sheriff's Office sat on the eastern edge of Ellensburg, a low-slung brick building that looked like it had been translated from a more optimistic era. Elena stared at it through the rain-streaked windshield of Claire's Subaru, her sister's hand warm and steady on her shoulder. Do you want me to come in with you? Claire asked for the third time. Elena shook her head. This was something she needed to face alone. Whatever it was, she had spent 28 years preparing for this moment, though she'd never truly believed it would come. I'll wait right here, Claire said. Take as long as you need. The rain had softened to a drizzle as Elena stepped out of the car. Inside, the building smelled of coffee and floor wax, institutional and impersonal. A young deputy at the front desk stood immediately when she approached. Mrs. Voss, Detective Porter is expecting you. Follow me, please. They walked down a corridor lined with photographs of former sheriffs, men with stern faces and outdated mustaches, guardians of a frontier that no longer existed. The deputy knocked twice on a door marked Investigations. Before opening it, Detective Marcus Porter rose from behind a cluttered desk. He was younger than Elena had expected, early 40s perhaps, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of tired eyes that suggested he'd seen more than his share of human tragedy. "Mrs. Voss, thank you for coming." His handshake was firm but gentle. "Please sit down." The office was small, overwhelmed by filing cabinets and corkboards covered with photographs and maps. Elena noticed one board dedicated entirely to cold cases. Faces of the missing staring out with frozen hope. "I've been reviewing your husband and daughter's case," Porter began, settling into his chair. "I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you to walk me through that day one more time." September 14, 1991. Elena had told the story so many times it had become a script, drained of emotion through repetition. But today, with the detective's careful eyes on her, she felt the weight of each word. Nathan taught chemistry at the community college. He'd been talking about taking Iris on a special trip, just the two of them. Father-daughter bonding, he called it. They were going to drive down to Crater Lake Camp for a few nights, see the Oregon coast. She paused, the memory sharp despite the years. Iris was so excited. She packed her backpack 3 days early. "And you didn't go because my mother was sick. Stage 4 ovarian cancer. She lived in Seattle. Needed help with treatments. I was going to stay behind, catch up with them later at the coast if Mom was feeling better." Elena's throat tightened. Nathan promised they'd call from every stop. Did they? Once from Yucca that first afternoon around 3 o'clock, Nathan said traffic was light. Iris was singing along to the radio. Everything was fine. They were planning to stop in Bend for the night. Porter made a note. But they never arrived in Bend. No. When I didn't hear from them by 10 that night, I called the motel where they had a reservation. They'd never checked in. I waited until morning, thinking maybe they decided to camp instead. But she trailed off. The rest was in the files he'd already read. The car was never found, Porter said. More statement than question. No credit card activity after that gas station in Yucca. No witnesses who remembered seeing them. They simply vanished. Elena nodded. She'd heard it all before. The theories, the speculation that Nathan had run off with Iris to start a new life, that they'd had an accident in a remote area, that something worse, something unthinkable had happened. "Mrs. Voss," Porter leaned forward, his voice dropping. 3 days ago, a construction crew working on a highway expansion along Route 97, about 15 miles south of here, was drilling test holes for foundation work. They were working in a section of land that used to be privately owned before the state acquired it through eminent domain last year. Elena's heart began to hammer. They found something buried approximately 8 feet below the surface. Porter opened a folder on his desk, then seemed to reconsider. "Before I show you this, I need to prepare you. What they found is disturbing." "Just tell me," Elena whispered. "Please." Porter pulled out a photograph but kept it face down on the desk. "They found a vehicle, a silver 1989 Honda Accord. License plate matches your husband's car." The room swayed. Elena gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles white. "Where?" she managed. "Where exactly?" "On what used to be a large property owned by a man named Vernon Hale. He died in 1998 and the property sat vacant for years before the state bought it. The crew found the car buried in what appears to have been a hand pit. Buried, not crashed, not hidden. Buried. And Nathan Iris?" The question scraped her throat. Porter's expression held a careful blend of compassion and professional distance. "The car is being excavated as we speak. We'll know more in the next few hours. I need you to stay in the area, Mrs. Voss. We may need you to identify personal items to help us understand what we find." "You think they're in the car?" It wasn't a question. "I think," Porter said slowly, "that after 28 years, we finally have a place to look for answers." Elena stared at her hands at the wedding ring she'd never removed. 28 years of not knowing, of building her life around an absence, and now the earth itself was giving up its secrets. "This man, Vernon Hale," she said. "Who was he?" Porter pulled out another file. "Local eccentric, lived alone on 60 acres of forest land. No criminal record, kept to himself. Worked as a mechanic, ran a small auto repair shop out of his property. After he died, the property was tied up in estate litigation for years. A mechanic, Elena repeated. The word settled in her stomach like a stone. Someone who would know how to disable a car, how to make it disappear. We're not jumping to conclusions yet, Porter said, but his eyes told a different story. I've arranged for you to stay at the Hampton Inn here in Newtown. I'll call you the moment we know more. Elena stood, her legs unsteady. I want to see where they found it. The location. Mrs. Voss, I've waited 28 years, detective. I need to see the place where my family was buried. Porter studied her for a long moment. Then nodded. Tomorrow morning, I'll take you myself. As Elena walked back through the corridor, past the photographs of stern-faced sheriffs, she felt something shift inside her. The careful life she'd built, the peace she'd made with uncertainty, all of it was crumbling. But underneath the fear, underneath the grief that threatened to surge up and drown her, something else flickered. The possibility of knowing the terrible necessary possibility of the truth. Outside, Claire waited in the car, her face anxious. Elena climbed in slowly, her movements mechanical. They found the car, she said simply. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, Elena. Oh my God. As they drove to the hotel, Elena stared out at the rain-soaked landscape of Ellensburg. At the ordinary Tuesday afternoon unfolding around them, people going about their lives, unaware that somewhere beneath their feet, the earth was giving up its dead. That night, in her hotel room, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in the darkness, listening to the hum of the heating unit, her mind circling endlessly around the same questions. Had Nathan and Iris known what was happening? Had they been afraid? Had Nathan tried to protect Iris at the end? And the question that scraped at her most brutally, had they called for her? At 2:17 a.m., her phone rang. She grabbed it immediately. Mrs. Voss, it's Detective Porter. His voice was strained, different than it had been earlier. I need you to come to the excavation site now. Elena's pulse spiked. What did you find? A long pause filled with static and something else. A tremor of uncertainty that chilled her more than any certainty could have. Something we weren't expecting, Porter said. Something that changes everything. The excavation site was a chaos of lights and activity when Elena arrived. Generator-powered floods illuminated a scarred section of earth, turning the rainy darkness into artificial day. Yellow crime scene tape cordoned off an area the size of a small house, and at its center, a pit yawned open like a wound. Detective Porter met Elena at the perimeter, his face haggard in the harsh light. Claire stood close beside her sister, refusing to stay in the car this time. Before you see anything, Porter said, I need to explain what we found. Elena's hands trembled. But her voice held steady. Just show me. Porter led them closer, past clusters of forensic technicians in white suits, past officers speaking in low, urgent tones. As they approached the pit, Elena could see the roof of the Honda, its silver paint dulled by years underground, caked in mud and clay. The car was buried nose down at an angle, Porter explained. Someone dug this pit specifically for that purpose. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, planned. You said you found something unexpected, Elena pressed. Porter stopped at the edge of the pit. Below, two technicians were carefully working around the vehicle, photographing, measuring, documenting. One of them looked up and gave Porter a slight nod. When we opened the trunk, Porter said carefully. We found remains, skeletal remains of an adult male, based on preliminary assessment. Clothing fragments matched the description of what your husband was wearing. Elena's vision blurred. She had prepared herself for this, had known it was coming, but the confirmation still hit like a physical blow. Claire's arm slipped around her waist, holding her up. And Iris? The name came out broken. That's what we weren't expecting, Porter said. There are no other remains in the vehicle. No trace of your daughter. The words didn't make sense at first. Elena stared at him, waiting for the rest of the explanation. What do you mean? I mean, Iris wasn't in the car, Mrs. Voss. We've searched the entire vehicle, checked the surrounding excavation area. Your husband is there, but your daughter isn't. The ground seemed to shift beneath Elena's feet. 28 years of assuming they died together, of picturing them side by side in whatever final moment they'd faced. But Iris wasn't there. Where is she? Elena heard herself ask. Though the question was absurd. If Detective Porter knew, he would have said, "We don't know, but there's something else you need to see." Porter led them to a folding table set up under a temporary canopy. On it, sealed in clear evidence bags, lay items recovered from the car. Elena recognized Nathan's wallet, water-damaged but intact. His watch, a road atlas with their route marked in green highlighter, and Iris's purple backpack. Elena reached toward it reflexively, then pulled her hand back. Through the plastic, she could see the Snoopy patch Iris had sewn on herself, slightly crooked. The zipper pull shaped like a butterfly. "We haven't fully processed the contents yet," Porter said. "But there's something inside we thought you should know about immediately." He pulled out a second evidence bag. Inside was a child's spiral notebook, the kind used for schoolwork. The cover was stained and warped, but Elena could make out Iris's name written in careful 7-year-old handwriting. "We found this in a zippered compartment of the backpack." Porter said, "It appears to be some kind of journal." "And Mrs. Voss?" "There are entries dated after September 14, 1991. The world tilted sideways." "That's impossible." Claire breathed, but Porter was already opening the bag, carefully extracting the notebook with gloved hands. He turned to a page marked with a sticky note and held it so Elena could see. The handwriting was Iris's. Elena would have recognized it anywhere. Those careful block letters, the backwards S she always made. But the date at the top of the page read September 23, 1991, 9 days after they disappeared. Elena's vision tunneled as she read September 23, 1991. "We are staying in the old house now. The man says I have to be very quiet. He says, Daddy got sick and had to go to the hospital, but I don't believe him. I think something bad happened. I want to go home to Mommy, but he won't let me. He says, if I try to leave or tell anyone, something bad will happen to Mommy, too. I'm scared. I'm trying to be brave like Daddy taught me, but I'm really scared. The man says I can't use my real name anymore. He says I have to call myself Sarah now, but I'm not Sarah. I'm Iris." Elena's legs gave out. She would have fallen if Claire hadn't caught her. Lowered her into a folding chair someone quickly provided. "There are more entries," Porter said quietly. "Spanning several months. The last entry is dated March 1992. 6 months. Iris had been alive for at least 6 months after they disappeared. What happened to her?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "Where did she go?" "We're going to find out," Porter promised. "We're executing a full excavation of the entire property. If there's anything else buried here, we'll find it." "You think she's dead?" Elena looked up at him. "You think she's buried somewhere else on this property?" Porter's silence was answer enough. A commotion near the pit drew their attention. One of the forensic technicians was calling for Detective Porter, his voice urgent. Porter excused himself and jogged over, leaving Elena and Claire alone with the evidence table. Elena stared at the notebook at her daughter's handwriting frozen in time. Iris had been alive, had been held captive, terrified, calling out for a mother who had no idea she was still breathing. The guilt that slammed into Elena was physical, suffocating. While Iris had been imprisoned somewhere, probably on this very property, Elena had been in Seattle helping her mother through chemo treatments. While Iris had been writing desperate diary entries, Elena had been filing missing persons reports, sitting through police interviews, slowly accepting that her family was gone. But Iris hadn't been gone. Not right away. "Elena." Claire's voice was thick with tears. "This isn't your fault. You couldn't have known." "I should have been with them," Elena said. "If I'd gone on that trip, maybe. Then maybe all 3 of you would be in that pit," Claire said fiercely. "Don't do this to yourself. Porter was returning, his face even graver than before. "Mrs. Voss, we need to expand our search beyond this immediate area. I've called in cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar equipment. It'll be her. By morning." He paused. "I have to ask. Do you want to stay for this? It could take days. And what we find?" "I'm staying," Elena said immediately. "I'm not leaving until we find her." Porter nodded. "I'll have an officer escort you back to the hotel. Try to get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be difficult." As they walked back to Claire's car, Elena cast one last look at the excavation site, at the muddy grave that had held half her family for 28 years. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the floodlights, in the acres of overgrown forest and forgotten ground, her daughter might be waiting. Or what remained of her daughter. In the car, Claire gripped the steering wheel but didn't start the engine. "Do you really think Iris could be alive?" she asked quietly. After all this time, Elena had been doing the math in her head. Iris would be 35 now. A grown woman with a life Elena knew nothing about. The entries stopped in March 1992. Elena said 6 months after they disappeared. If she'd escaped, if she'd survived, she would have come home. She would have found a way. Unless she couldn't, Claire said. Unless whoever took them convinced her you didn't want her back or that you were dead. Children are easy to manipulate, especially traumatized ones. It was a kindness, this sliver of hope. But Elena couldn't afford hope. Hope was what had sustained her through the first year, then the second, then the 10th. Hope was what had slowly poisoned into a kind of madness before she'd learned to let it go. "We'll know soon enough," Elena said. But as Claire drove them back through the rain-sick streets of Ellensburg, Elena found herself whispering a prayer she'd abandoned decades ago. A plea to whoever might be listening that when the dogs and the radar and the digging finally stopped, they would find only empty earth. That somewhere, against all odds and logic, Iris had survived. That the daughter she'd lost at 7 was still breathing, still existing, somewhere under the same sky. It was a foolish hope, irrational and fragile, but it was all Elena had. The Hampton Inn's breakfast buffet was nearly empty when Elena arrived the next morning. She'd slept perhaps 2 hours, her dreams haunted by images of Iris writing in that notebook, small and terrified in some dark place, while Elena slept soundly 40 m away. Claire was already at a corner table, 2 cups of coffee waiting. She looked as exhausted as Elena felt. Porter called, Claire said as Elena sat down. "They're starting the full property search at 8. He's sending a car for you." Elena wrapped her hands around the coffee cup seeking its warmth. Through the window, she could see Ellensburg waking up, people heading to work, students walking to campus, the ordinary rhythms of life continuing as if the world hadn't split open. "I've been thinking about that man," Elena said. "Vernon Hale. What kind of person buries a car 8 foot underground?" "Someone with heavy equipment," Claire replied. "Someone who planned it carefully." The detective. V.E. said he was a mechanic, that he ran an auto repair shop from his property. Elena's mind was working, fitting pieces together. What if Nathan had car trouble? What if they stopped at this Vernon Hale shop? Claire's eyes widened and Hale saw an opportunity, a man traveling alone with a little girl, probably carrying cash for the trip. The thought made Elena's stomach turn, but it felt right. There had never been any evidence of Nathan planning to disappear. No financial irregularities, no secret life. He'd been a good man, a loving father. Whatever had happened to them had been sudden, violent, unplanned. "I need to know everything about Vernon Hale," Elena said. "Everything." An hour later, Elena stood once again at the edge of the excavation site, now expanded to include a grid pattern of yellow flags marking areas for the cadaver dogs to search. The morning was overcast, threatening more rain, and the muddy ground had been churned into a morass by boots and equipment. Detective Porter approached with another man, younger, carrying a tablet. "Mrs. Voss, this is Deputy Marshall. He's been researching Vernon Hale's background." Marshall nodded respectfully. "Ma'am, I've compiled what we know about Hale. It's not much, but it's interesting." He pulled up a photograph on his tablet, a driver's license image of a man in his 50s with thinning hair and cold, flat eyes. Elena studied the face, trying to see evil in it, but he looked ordinary. That was what made it worse. Vernon Hale was born in 1938, died in May 1998 of a heart attack. Never married, no children. Ran Hale's auto service from 1975 until his death. According to county records, he owned 63 acres of forested land, most of it undeveloped except for his house, the shop, and a few outbuildings. Did he have a criminal record? Elena asked. Nothing, not even a traffic ticket. By all accounts, he was a recluse, but not violent. Neighbors, and there weren't many, described him as quiet, kept to himself. What about after he died? Claire asked. Who inherited the property? Marshall scrolled through his notes. That's where it gets complicated. Hale had a nephew, Thomas Hale, who contested the will. Hale had left everything to some kind of conservation trust, but Thomas claimed his uncle wasn't mentally competent. The litigation dragged on for years. By the time it was settled and the state acquired the land for the highway expansion, the property had been abandoned for over 2 decades. Can we talk to Thomas Hale? Elena asked. Porter shook his head. He died in 2007. Overdose. A shout from across the excavation site interrupted them. One of the cadaver dogs, a German Shepherd, was sitting rigid at attention near a cluster of overgrown brush about 50 yards from where the car had been found. Its handler waved urgently for Porter. Elena's heart stuttered as they hurried over. The dog remained perfectly still, trained not to disturb potential evidence. Porter conferred quietly with the handler, then turned to the forensic team. Mark this location. I want ground-penetrating radar here immediately. What did the dog find? Elena asked, though she already knew. A hit, Porter said quietly, indicating human remains. The next hour passed in agonizing slow motion as technicians set up the radar equipment and began their scan. Elena stood outside the perimeter, Claire beside her, both women silent. The overcast sky had darkened and the first drops of rain began to fall. When the technician finally stood up from his equipment, his face was grim. He called Porter over and they spoke in low voices, the technician pointing at his screen, then at the ground. Porter's shoulders sagged slightly. Then he walked back to Elena, and she knew from his expression what he was going to say before he spoke. The radar shows an anomaly consistent with remains at approximately 4 feet deep, small, child-sized. The rain was falling harder now, but Elena didn't move. She stared at the spot where the dog sat, where her daughter might be buried, and he felt something inside her crack open. We're going to excavate carefully, Porter continued. It'll take time. Several hours probably. I really think you should. I'm staying, Elena said. Her voice sounded hollow, distant. They erected a canopy over the excavation area as the rain intensified. Elena watched from beneath another canopy as forensic technicians began the delicate work of removing earth layer by layer, sifting through soil, documenting every centimeter of progress. Claire tried to get Elena to sit, to eat something, to drink water, but Elena remained standing, her eyes fixed on the excavation. Hours passed. The rain drummed against the canopy roof. Technicians rotated in and out, maintaining the meticulous pace required for proper evidence recovery. It was nearly 3 o'clock when the first shout went up. We've got something. Porter moved quickly to the edge of the pit, now about 3 feet deep. Elena started forward, but he held up a hand. Stay back, please, Mrs. Voss. Let them work. The technicians conferred, photographed, then carefully, so carefully, began to uncover what they'd found. Elena could see fragments, something purple, the color of Iris's backpack, then white, stark against the dark soil. Bone. A technician looked up, met Porter's eyes, and gave a small, grim nod. Mrs. Voss, Porter said gently, turning to her. We found remains. I need you to understand. Identification will take time. Dental records, DNA analysis, but there are personal items consistent with your daughter's belongings. Elena's vision swam. 28 years of not knowing. And now this. Not reunion. Not miraculous survival. Just bones in the ground and a purple backpack. How? She whispered. How did she die? We won't know until the medical examiner completes the examination. But Mrs. Voss, Porter hesitated. There are indications of trauma to the skeletal remains. I can't say more until we have a full analysis. Trauma. The word was clinical, sanitized. It meant violence. It meant suffering. Elena's knees buckled. This time when she fell, she didn't get back up. She knelt in the mud, the rain soaking through her clothes. And finally, after 28 years of careful control, she let herself shatter. The scream that tore from her throat was primal, inhuman. It was every nightmare she'd pushed down, every imagined horror she tried not to picture, every moment of Iris's fear and pain made manifest. Claire dropped beside her, arms around her, but nothing could contain the grief that was erupting. She had failed. Had failed to protect her daughter. Failed to find her in time. Failed in every way that mattered. She was 7 years old. Elena sobbed. 7. She still believed in the Tooth Fairy. She was afraid of the dark. She needed me and I wasn't there. Around them. The excavation continued with quiet efficiency, but Elena was aware of nothing except the bottomless chasm opening inside her chest. Somewhere in that pit, beneath layers of earth and time, was all that remained of the little girl who had kissed her goodbye on a Saturday morning and vanished into horror. Later, she didn't know how much later. Porter approached again. His voice was soft, unbearably kind. Mrs. Voss, we need to expand the excavation. The radar is showing additional anomalies, multiple sites across the property. Elena looked up at him, her face strewn with mud and tears. Additional sites. We think, Porter paused, choosing his words carefully. We think there may be other victims. This property, this pit where we found your daughter, it wasn't his first. The implication settled over Elena like a shroud. Vernon Hale hadn't just killed Nathan and Iris. He'd done this before, probably many times. How many? She asked. We don't know yet. We're finding at least 3 other locations where the dogs have alerted, maybe more. Elena stared at the excavation site, at the growing perimeter of yellow flags marking graves, and I felt her understanding of what had happened shift again. This wasn't random violence. This was systematic practice. He hunted them, she said quietly. He ran an auto shop on a highway and he hunted travelers. Porter nodded. That's our working theory. As the afternoon darkened toward evening, the excavation team continued their grim work. Elena finally allowed Claire to take her back to the hotel, but only after Porter promised to call the moment they found anything else. In the hotel room, Elena stood under the shower until the water ran cold, trying to wash away the mud and the horror, but some stains went deeper than skin. That night, unable to sleep, she pulled out the folder Porter had given her, copies of the diary entries they'd found in Iris's backpack. She'd been avoiding reading them, afraid of what they would reveal. But she needed to know, needed to understand what her daughter had endured. With trembling hands, she opened the folder and began to read. The diary entries were written in Iris's careful 7-year-old handwriting. Each letter painstakingly formed. Elena read them in chronological order, and with each page, her heart broke anew. September 15, 1991. Daddy's car made a funny noise and we stopped at a garage. The man there was nice at first. He said he could fix it fast. He gave me a soda while Daddy talked to him. But then Daddy went into the bathroom and didn't come out for a long time. When I went to check on him, the man grabbed me. He put his hand over my mouth. I tried to scream, but I couldn't. I'm so scared. I don't know where Daddy is. Elena's hands shook as she turned to the next entry. September 16, 1991. The man says, Daddy is in the hospital. He says, Daddy got very sick and the ambulance took him away. But I don't believe him because why didn't the ambulance come here? Why didn't I see it? The man says I have to stay with him until Daddy gets better. He locked me in a room. There's a bed and a window, but the window has bars on it. I can see trees outside. I want to go home. The entries continued, chronicling Iris's captivity in heartbreaking detail. She wrote about the meals the man brought her. Sandwiches, canned soup, crackers, about the books he gave her to read, about how he wouldn't let her leave the room except to use the bathroom. And even then, he stood outside the door. September 20th, 1991. I asked the man again about Daddy. He got angry. He said if I keep asking questions, something bad will happen to Mommy. He knows where Mommy lives. He showed me a map with our house marked on it. He said if I try to escape or tell anyone when he takes me places that he'll hurt Mommy. I have to protect Mommy. I can't let anything happen to her. Elena pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Iris had stayed silent to protect her, had endured captivity and fear because Vernon Hale had weaponized a 7-year-old's love for her mother. October 3, 1991. The man says, I can't be Iris anymore. He says, from now on, my name is Sarah. He says, Iris is gone, and I have to forget I was ever her, but I won't forget. I'm writing this so I won't forget. My name is Iris Eleanor Voss. My mommy is Elena and my daddy is Nathan. I live on Whidbey Island. I go to Coopville Elementary. My teacher is Mrs. Patterson. I won't forget. The entries showed Iris's desperate attempts to hold on to her identity, listing facts about her life like a lifeline. But as the weeks passed, Elena could see her daughter's hope beginning to fracture. November 12, 1991. I asked the man if I can call Mommy. Just to hear her voice. He said no. He said Mommy thinks I'm dead. He showed me a newspaper. It said search called off for missing girl. He said everyone stopped looking for me. He said nobody wants me anymore. But that can't be true. Mommy would never stop looking. Never. But Ella Lenina had stopped. Not stopped looking, but stopped hoping. By November 1991, she'd been in therapy, learning to accept that Nathan and Iris were gone, that she would never know what happened to them. She'd packed up Iris's room, donated her clothes, tried to move forward while Iris had been locked in a room, believing her mother had given up on her. December 25, 1991. It's Christmas. The man gave me a present, a doll with a yellow hair. I don't want a stupid doll. I want to go home. I want Mommy. I want Daddy. I hate this place. I hate him. I tried to break the window bars with the bed frame, but they won't break. My hands are bleeding. The man says, if I keep being bad, he'll have to punish me. The next entry was dated 2 weeks later, and the handwriting was shakier. January 8, 1992. I was bad again, and the man punished me. He didn't give me food for 2 days. My stomach hurts so much. He says I have to learn to behave. He says I have to call him Uncle Vernon now. I don't want to, but he won't give me food unless I say it. I'm so hungry. I said it. I called him Uncle Vernon. I feel sick about it, but I had to. I had to eat. Elena read through tears as the entries documented Iris's gradual breaking. The slow erosion of a child's spirit under systematic abuse. Vernon Hale had been methodical in his destruction, using isolation, fear, and manipulation to reshape Iris into compliance. February 14, 1992. Uncle Vernon says if I'm very good, I can go outside soon. He says there's a special place he wants to show me. A pretty place with flowers. I don't trust him, but I want to go outside so bad. I haven't been outside since September. I can see snow through my window. I used to love snow. Me and Daddy would build snowmen. Does Daddy remember me? Does Mommy still think about me on Valentine's Day? We always made heart-shaped cookies together. There were 3 more entries, each more haunting than the last. The final entry was dated March 7, 1992, nearly 6 months after Iris's abduction. March 7, 1992. Uncle Vernon says, tomorrow we're going to the special place with the flowers. He says it's a surprise. He's being extra nice today. He let me have 2 cookies after dinner. He says, I've been such a good girl and I deserve a reward, but something feels wrong. He keeps looking at me in a way that makes my skin feel crawly. I don't want to go to the special place. I want to stay in my room, but he says I have to go. He says it's time. The entry ended there. No more pages, no more words. Elena closed the folder, her whole body shaking. She understood now the special place had been Iris's grave. Vernon Hale had spent 6 months conditioning a terrified child, breaking down her resistance, making her compliant. And when she was finally tractable enough, when she'd stopped fighting, when she trusted him enough to go willingly, he'd killed her. The cruelty of it was staggering. Not a quick death in the heat of violence, but a slow, calculated breaking, followed by murder disguised as a reward. Elena stood and walked to the hotel window, staring out at the dark streets of Ellensburg. Somewhere out there, the excavation sea continued under floodlights. They were finding Vernon Hale's other victims now, mapping the full extent of his predation. Her phone buzzed. A text from Detective Porter. Can you come to the station tomorrow at 9 a.m.? We've identified one of the other victims and need your help with something. Elena texted back. I'll be there. She should try to sleep, but sleep seemed impossible. Instead, she sat in a chair by the window and watched the night, thinking about all the moments she could have changed. If she'd gone on the trip, if she'd insisted Nathan take a different route, if she'd called when she didn't hear from them by dinner instead of waiting until 10 o'clock. But regret was a spiral with no bottom, and Elena had spent 28 years learning not to drown in it. Instead, she thought about Iris's words. I won't forget. My name is Iris Elena Voss. Her daughter had fought to hold on to herself even as Vernon Hale tried to erase her. She documented her captivity, left a record of what had happened. In her own way, Iris had made sure the truth would eventually come out. I'm so sorry, baby, Elena whispered to the dark window. I'm so sorry I couldn't save you. But even as she said it, she made a promise. Vernon Hale was dead, beyond justice, but his crimes would not stay buried. Elena would make sure every victim was identified, every family notified. She would make sure the world knew what he'd done. It wouldn't bring Iris back. Nothing could. But it was something. A last act of motherhood for a daughter she'd failed to protect. As dawn began to lighten the sky, Elena finally fell into an exhausted sleep in the chair, still holding the folder of diary entries. She dreamed of a 7-year-old girl riding by candlelight in a locked room, determined not to forget who she was, even as the world forgot about her. And in the dream, Elena found her way to that room, broke down the door, and carried her daughter out into the light. But when she woke, the room was empty, and Iris was still in the ground. The Catas County Sheriff's Office looked different in daylight, less ominous, more bureaucratic. Elena arrived at precisely 9 o'clock. Claire once again insisting on driving her. Detective Porter met them in the lobby along with a woman Elena didn't recognize. Mid-40s, auburn hair, professional suit. Her eyes held the same haunted quality Elena saw in her own mirror. Mrs. Voss, thank you for coming. This is Jennifer Ashford. She drove up from Portland this morning. Jennifer extended her hand and Elena took it. The woman's grip was firm but trembling slightly. I'm sorry to meet you under these circumstances, Jennifer said. Detective Porter told me about your daughter. Porter led them to a conference room where photographs and documents were spread across a large table. Elena recognized crime scene photos from the excavation, maps of Vernon Hale's property, and what appeared to be missing persons reports. We've made significant progress in the last 18 hours, Port R began. The cadaver dogs have alerted at 7 different locations on Hale's property. So far, we've completed excavation at 3 of those sites. He pulled out a photograph. Skeletal remains carefully arranged on a medical examiner's table. This is from the second site we excavated. Female, approximately 14 to 16 years old at time of death. She was buried with personal items, including a class ring from Lincoln High School in Portland, Oregon. Jennifer's face had gone pale. She reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph, sliding it across the table. It showed a teenage girl with long dark hair and a bright smile wearing a cheerleader uniform. My sister Amy Ashford, she disappeared in July 1985 on a road trip with two friends. They were driving from Portland to Seattle. They stopped for gas in Yucca and that was the last confirmed sighting. Elena's stomach clenched. What happened to her friends? We found them at the third excavation site, Porter said quietly. Buried together. Melissa Chen and Rachel Kowalski. All three girls were 16 years old. The room fell silent. Elena stared at the photographs of the three smiling teenagers, frozen forever at 16. Their road trip ending in Vernon Hale's carefully prepared graves. How long have you been looking for them? Elena asked Jennifer. 34 years, Jennifer's voice cracked. I was 12 when Amy disappeared. She was my best friend, my hero. My parents never recovered. Dad died 5 years ago, still not knowing what happened to her. Mom's in a nursing home now. Dementia. Some days she thinks Amy is still alive, just away at college. I'm so sorry, Elena said, and meant it. She understood that particular hell, the not knowing, the endless questions, the way absence became a presence that filled every room. Mrs. Voss Porter interjected gently. The reason we asked you here is because we found something in the excavation of the site where Amy and her friends were buried. Something that might connect to Iris. He pulled out another evidence bag. This one containing a small tarnished silver bracelet. Even through the plastic, Elena could see the tiny charms hanging from it. A heart, a star, a crescent moon. This was found near Amy's remains, Porter said. Do you recognize it? Elena's breath caught. That's Iris's bracelet. I gave it to her for her 6th birthday. Are you certain? Absolutely. See that charm? Elena pointed to a small dolphin. She picked that one out herself at the aquarium. It was her favorite. Porter exchanged a glance with another detective who had quietly entered the room. Mrs. Voss. The bracelet was found approximately 8 feet from Amy's burial site, not with Iris's remains, but with Amy's. Elena frowned, trying to understand the implication. How is that possible? Amy disappeared in 1985. Iris wasn't even born yet. Exactly, Porter said. Which means this bracelet was placed there later, possibly much later. Hale kept trophies, the other detective said. He was older, gray-haired with the WEAT. He'd look of someone who'd seen too much. We found a locked shed on the property. Inside was a collection of personal items. Jewelry, driver's licenses, photographs, items taken from victims. The bracelet might have been in that collection. But why would it end up at Amy's grave? Jennifer asked. Porter pulled out a map of the property marked with flags indicating burial sites. We think Hale visited the graves regularly. The burial sites show signs of maintenance, disturbed earth, items that appear to have been added over time. He was obsessive about his victims, kept them organized, categorized. We found notebooks in the shed documenting dates, locations, names he'd given them. Elena felt sick. Vernon Hale hadn't just killed these people. He'd collected them, curated them like a grotesque museum. How many? She asked. How many victims are we talking about? The gay-haired detective, his nameplate read, Sergeant Rains, pulled out a file folder thick with papers. Based on what we found in the shed and the ground-penetrating radar scans, we believe there could be as many as 15 to 20 victims spanning from the late 1970s until his death in 1998. The number hit Elena like a physical blow. 20 people. 20 families who had spent decades not knowing, searching, hoping. Were they all travelers? Jennifer asked. People who stopped at his shop. We think so, Reese said. Hale's auto shop was positioned on Route 97, a major north-south corridor. He would have seen hundreds of potential targets every week. Most drove right past, but some would stop. Car trouble, need directions, looking for a phone. He was patient, Porter added. Could go months or even years between kills. That's part of why he was never caught. The victims disappeared from different jurisdictions, different states. No pattern was ever established. Elena looked down at the photograph of Iris's bracelet, thinking about her daughter's diary entries. Vernon Hale had spent 6 months breaking Iris down, teaching her to be compliant. Had he done that with all his victims, or was Iris special somehow? The diary entries we found. Elena said slowly. Did you find diaries from any other victims? Porter shook his head. Just Iris's. And that's unusual. Hale was meticulous about eliminating evidence. The fact that he let her keep a diary, let her write about her captivity, it suggests he wanted a record. He wanted to remember the process. He was savoring it, Rhee said bluntly. The breaking of her will, the gradual transformation from Iris to Sarah. That was the real crime for him. The killing was almost an afterthought. Jennifer had gone very quiet, her eyes fixed on the photographs of her sister and the 2 friends who had died with her. Did they suffer? She asked finally. Amy and her friends, did they? The medical examiner found evidence of blunt force trauma to all 3 skulls, Porter said gently. It would have been quick. We don't believe they were held captive for any extended period. Jennifer nodded. Tears sliding down her cheeks. Elena reached across the table and took her hand. 2 strangers bound by grief and the same monster. There's something else we need to discuss, Porter said. He looked uncomfortable and Elena braced herself. We found photographs in Hale's shed. Polaroids, mostly images of his victims both before and after death. Elena's stomach turned. There are photographs of Iris, Porter continued quietly. Taken during her captivity. We thought you should know they exist, though I don't recommend viewing them. They're difficult. I want to see them, Elena said immediately. Mrs. Voss, I need to see them. Her voice was firm. I need to know what she went through. Porter studied her for a long moment, then nodded. He pulled out a smaller evidence bag containing a stack of Polaroid photographs. These are copies. The originals are being processed for evidence. I'm going to show you 3 images. If at any point you want me to stop, just say so. He placed the first photograph on the table. It showed Iris sitting on a narrow bed in what appeared to be a small windowless room. She was wearing the same clothes she'd had on when she disappeared. A purple t-shirt and jeans, but they looked dirty, rumpled. Her face was turned toward the camera, her expression blank, hollow. The date written on the white frame read September 17, 1991, 2 days after the abduction. Iris was still alive, still physically intact, but the light in her eyes, the spark that had made her Iris, was already dimming. Elena's vision blurred, but she forced herself to keep looking. Porter placed a second photograph beside the first. Same room, different date. October 24, 1991. Iris sat in the same position, but her hair was longer, unkempt. She'd lost weight, her face gaunt. But it was her eyes that struck Elena most. They were empty, staring at nothing. He photographed her regularly, Porter said, documenting the process. We found images spanning the entire 6 months. The third photograph was dated March 6, 1992, the day before the final diary entry. Iris looked different in this one. Cleaner, her hair brushed, wearing clothes that appeared new, but her expression remained vacant, defeated. This was taken the day before we believe she was killed, Porter said softly. Elena stared at her daughter's face, at the ghost of the child she'd raised, and felt something shift inside her. The grief was still there, vast and crushing. But underneath it, anger began to burn. Vernon Hale had done this, had systematically destroyed a 7-year-old child, documented his crime like a scientist recording an experiment, and then buried her in the ground like garbage. I want to see his house, Elena said abruptly. Porter looked surprised. The house where he lived, where he kept her. I want to see it. Mrs. Voss, the property is still an active crime scene. I don't care. You said yourself the excavations will take weeks. I want to see where my daughter spent the last 6 months of her life. Porter and Raines exchanged glances. Finally, Porter nodded. All right, I'll take you this afternoon, but I need you to understand what you see there won't bring you peace. It might make things worse. It can't get worse, Elena said. She was wrong. Vernon Hale's property looked different in daylight, though no less menacing. The house was a weathered 2-story farmhouse, white paint peeling, shutters hanging crooked. Behind it stood several outbuildings, a large garage that had housed the auto shop, a storage shed, and a smaller structure that might have been a workshop. Yellow crime scene tape cordoned off the entire property. Forensic tents had been erected over the excavation sites. White domes scattered across the property like grotesque mushrooms. Porter parked near the main house, and Elena stepped out into the cool afternoon air. The property was surrounded by dense forest, isolated. The nearest neighbor more than a mile away. No one would have heard screams here. No one would have noticed strange activity. The house has been processed, Porter said, leading Elena up the sagging porch steps. We've collected evidence, photographed everything, but nothing's been moved yet. He unlocked the front door and they stepped into a dim hallway that smelled of mildew and decay. The interior was frozen in time. 1990s furniture, outdated wallpaper, magazines on a coffee table dated from early 1998, just before Hale's death. He lived alone? Elena asked. As far as we can determine, the house shows signs of only one occupant. No photographs of family, no personal correspondence. Vernon Hale was a hermit who built his life around his crimes. They moved through the house slowly. The kitchen was dated but clean, surprisingly ordinary. Dishes in the drainer, a coffee maker on the counter, a calendar on the wall still turned to May 1998. Where did he keep them? Elena asked. The victims he held captive. Porter led her to a door at the end of the hallway. The basement, that's where he brought them. He opened the door, revealing stairs descending into darkness. Someone had strung temporary lighting, harsh fluorescent bulbs that flickered as Porter flipped the switch. The basement was finished, not the typical bare concrete and exposed beams Elena had expected. The walls were insulated, soundproofed with acoustic foam in places. At the far end of the room stood a heavy metal door with a serious deadbolt lock. The room where he kept Iris, Porter said quietly. Elena's legs felt unsteady as she approached the door. Porter unlocked it and pushed it open, the hinges creaking. The room was exactly as it appeared in the Polaroids. Small, maybe 8 × 10 feet, with a narrow bed against one wall, a small table, and a bucket in the corner that Elena realized with horror had served as a toilet. The walls were painted a dingy beige, and there was a single air vent near the ceiling. No windows, no natural light, nothing but this box. Elena stepped inside, and the walls seemed to close in around her. This was where Iris had spent 6 months. This was where she'd written her diary entries, where she'd cried for her mother, where she'd slowly been broken down into someone else. On the wall beside the bed, Elena noticed something. She stepped closer, her breath catching. Scratches. Dozens of tiny scratches in groups of 5, marking days. Iris had been counting, keeping track of time in the only way she could. Elena counted them. 179 marks. 179 days of captivity. Mrs. Voss. Porter's voice was gentle. We should go. But Elena couldn't move. She stood in the center of the room where her daughter had suffered and felt the weight of those 179 days pressing down on her. She was alone. Elena whispered. So terribly alone. Not entirely, Porter said. We found evidence that Hale came down here regularly. Brought her meals, books. There's a pattern to it. Very scheduled, controlled. 3 meals a day at specific times. 1 hour of supervised bathroom time. He was maintaining her, keeping her functioning. Like a pet, Elena said bitterly. Like a possession. Porter corrected. Something he owned and controlled completely. Elena turned slowly, taking in every detail of the room. The thin mattress with its stained sheets. The table with gouges from Iris's fingernails. The door with its heavy lock. On the floor near the bed, she noticed something else. A small stain, rust-colored, old blood. She hurt herself trying to escape, Porter said, following Elena's gaze. The diary entries mention it. The medical examiner found evidence of healed fractures in her hand bones, consistent with repeated impacts against a hard surface. Elena closed her eyes, picturing Iris beating her small fists against the door, screaming for help that would never come. "I need to see the shed," she said abruptly. "Where he kept the trophies." Porter hesitated. "Mrs. Voss, I really don't think, please." Elena met his eyes. "I need to understand the full scope of what he did. Not just to Iris, to all of them." After a long moment, Porter nodded. They left the house and walked across the muddy property toward a large metal shed near the Trian. 2 officers stood guard outside and they stepped aside as Porter approached. "Give us a few minutes," Porter told them. Inside, the shed was organized with disturbing precision. Metal shelves lined the walls, each shelf containing clear plastic bins labeled with dates and numbers. A filing cabinet stood in one corner, and a workbench occupied the center of the space. Porter opened one of the bins, revealing its contents. A driver's license, a watch, a ring, a set of keys, all carefully preserved in individual bags. "Each bin represents one victim," he explained. Hale documented everything, when they arrived, where they were buried, what items he took from them. Elena moved along the shelves, reading the dates. 1979, 1983, 1987, 1991, 1995. The bins chronicled 2 decades of murder. "Did he have names for them?" Elena asked. "Real names?" Puh. Reuter pulled out a notebook from the filing cabinet. He kept meticulous records. Real names when he knew them, physical descriptions, dates of acquisition. That's the word he used. Acquisition. He flipped through the pages until he found an entry that made him pause. Here, Nathan Voss, September 15, 1991. Traveling with daughter approximately 7 years old. Target of opportunity. Vehicle disabled. Subject trusting. Daughter designated for retention. Retention. The clinical term for what he done to Iris. "Are there others?" Elena asked. "Other children he retained." Porter's expression darkened. 2, both girls, both around the same age as Iris when they were taken. "We found their remains at separate sites. They didn't survive as long as your daughter did. 3 months, maybe 4. Why did Iris last longer? We don't know. Maybe she was more compliant. Maybe Hale was perfecting his technique. Or maybe Porter trailed off. Maybe what? Maybe he genuinely cared about her in his own twisted way. The photographs, the diary he let her keep, the care he took in maintaining her, it suggests an attachment. Not love, nothing healthy, but an obsession." The thought made Elena's skin crawl. That Vernon Hale might have felt something approximating affection for Iris while systematically destroying her. She moved to the workbench where more evidence bags were laid out. Among them, she recognized items that had belonged to Nathan. His wedding ring, his wallet, his watch. All carefully preserved, catalogued, kept. "Can I have them back?" Elena asked quietly. Nathan's things eventually, yes. After the trial. Trial? Elena looked up. "Vernon Hale is dead. But we've discovered something else," Porter said. "Evidence suggesting Hale might not have worked alone. At least not all the time." Elena's blood went cold. "What kind of evidence?" "Receipts, correspondence, references in his notebooks to someone he called V. We're still piecing it together, but there are indications that Hale had an accomplice, someone who may have helped him acquire victims, dispose of bodies, maintain the property. Someone who might still be alive," Elena said slowly. Porter nodded. "Someone who might still be out there." A shout from outside interrupted them. One of the officers was running toward the shed, his face urgent. "Detective, we've got something at excavation site 7. You need to see this now." They hurried across the property to a forensic tent erected near the eastern edge of the land. Inside, technicians were carefully brushing soil away from what appeared to be another set of remains. But these remains were different. "Adult male," one of the technicians said. "Buried much more recently than the others, probably within the last 10 to 15 years. "That's impossible," Porter said. "Hale died in 1998. This property has been abandoned since then." "Exactly," the technician replied, "which means whoever buried this body did it after Hale's death." The implication settled over them like a shroud. Vernon Hale was dead. But someone else had continued using his property as a burial ground. Someone who knew about the graves, about Hale's crimes, someone who might have been part of it all along. Elena stared down at the partial skeleton emerging from the earth and realized with mounting horror that this nightmare was far from over. Vernon Hale might be dead, but his legacy of violence was still alive. And somewhere his accomplice was watching. The discovery of the recent burial transformed the investigation overnight. What had been a grim archaeological excavation of historical crimes became an active manhunt. By the next morning, the property swarmed with FBI agents, state police, and forensic teams working with renewed urgency. Elena sat in the incident command tent that had been erected near the main house, watching through the open flap as agents moved between excavation sites. Detective Porter had insisted she stay away from the property, but Elena had refused. She needed to be here, needed to see this through to whatever end awaited. "Mrs. Boss." An FBI agent approached. A woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair pulled back severely. "I'm Special Agent Carolyn Reeves. I'm heading up the task force investigating Vernon Hale's accomplice." Elena stood to shake her hand. "Do you know who it is?" "We have a theory." Reeves gestured to the chair. "May I sit?" They settled across from each other at the folding table. Reeves pulled out a tablet and brought up a photograph, a driver's license image of a man in his late 40s with thinning brown hair and an unremarkable face. "Victor Mullen, age 48, works as a long-haul trucker based out of Spokane. We believe he's the V referenced in Hale's notebooks." "How did you find him?" "Cross-referencing Hale's financial records. Between 1995 and 1998, Hale made regular cash withdrawals, always the same amount, always on the 15th of the month. We found receipts for money orders sent to a P.O. box in Spokane. That box was registered to Victor Mullen." Elena studied the photograph. The man looked ordinary, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after seeing it. Why was Hale sending him money? "We think Mullen was providing him with information. As a trucker, Mullen traveled the same routes Hale's victims would have used. He could identify potential targets, people traveling alone, vehicles that might break down. He was essentially scouting for Hale." The sophistication of it chilled Elena. This wasn't just one predator. It was a network, organized and methodical. "You said the recent burial was 10 to 15 years old," Elena said. "Hale died in 1998. Has Mullen been killing on his own?" "We don't think so. The burial shows signs of hastiness, lack of the precision Hale used. We believe Mullen buried someone who died of natural or accidental causes, possibly someone he knew, someone whose death needed to be concealed. He remembered Hale's property and used it for disposal." "Do you have him in custody?" Reeves' expression tightened. "Not yet. Mullen hasn't been home in 3 days. His employer says he called in sick, which is unusual. Mullen rarely misses work. We've issued a BOLO, frozen his accounts, monitored his known associates." "He knows you're looking for him," Elena said. "Probably. News coverage of the excavations has been extensive. If Mullen was following the story, he'd know we'd eventually find evidence of his connection to Hale." Elena's phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "Turn on the news. Channel 7. She pulled out her phone and navigated to the station's live stream. A reporter stood in front of Vernon Hale's property, the excavation visible behind her. Sources within the investigation confirmed that FBI agents are now searching for Victor Mullen, believed to be an accomplice of serial killer Vernon Hale. Mullen is described as dangerous and should not be approached. If you have information about his whereabouts. Reeves swore under her breath. The leak came from someone. Now he'll know exactly what we know. Maybe that's good, Elena said. Maybe he'll make a mistake. Or maybe he'll run. Or worse. Reeves stood abruptly. Excuse me, Mrs. Voss. I need to coordinate with my team. Left alone, Elena watched the news coverage on her phone. They were showing photographs of Vernon Hale, now file footage from his obituary. The reporter was explaining the scope of the crimes, the number of victims, the decades of predation. Her phone rang. An unknown number. Elena almost didn't answer, but something made her press accept. Hello. Heavy breathing on the other end. Then a voice. Male. Rough. You're her mother. Elena's blood turned to ice. Who is this? You're Iris's mother. I saw you on the news. Victor Mullen, Elena said. It wasn't a question. A long pause. She talked about you toward the end when Vernon was breaking her. She'd cry for you at night. Elena's hand tightened on the phone. Where are you? Somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't find me. His breathing was ragged, agitated. I need you to understand something. I didn't hurt her. I never touched any of them. That was all Vernon. You helped him, Elena said, her voice shaking with rage. You found victims for him. You're just as guilty. No. The word was sharp. I didn't know what he was doing. Not at first. I gave him information about people traveling alone, cars that looked unreliable. I thought he was just running a scam. Overcharging for repairs. I didn't know he was killing them. When did you find out? Silence. Then 1997. I stopped at his property unannounced. I saw things. A girl's shoe near one of the outbuildings. Fresh dirt in a pattern that didn't make sense. I confronted Vernon and he told me everything. And you didn't go to the police, Elena said flatly. He said if I told anyone, he'd implicate me. Said he'd kept evidence showing I was part of it. I was afraid. I had a family, a daughter of my own, so I stayed quiet. Elena closed her eyes. My daughter died because you were a coward. Your daughter died because Vernon Hale was a monster. Mullen shot back. I tried to stop him. After I found out, I stopped sending information, told him I was done, but he already had Iris by then. There was nothing I could do. You could have saved her. Elena's voice rose. You could have called the police, told them where she was. She was alive for 6 months, and you let her die. I'm sorry. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I've lived with it every day since. Vernon dying didn't end it. The guilt. It's been eating me alive for 20 years. Good, Elena said coldly. I hope it destroys you. It has. That's why I'm calling. I need you to know I'm going to make it right. There's no making this right. Turn yourself in. Face what you've done. I can't go to prison. I can't. His breathing was becoming more erratic. But I can give you something. Information Vernon never wrote down about where he took them. The special place. Elena's pulse spiked. What special place? There's a clearing in the forest about a/4 mile north of the main house. Vernon called it his garden. That's where he took them before the end. He'd tell them stories, make them feel safe. Then Mullen's voice broke. Your daughter's last day, March 7th. He took her to the garden. Elena's vision blurred with tears. The diary entry. Uncle Vernon says, tomorrow we're going to the special place with the flowers. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know. And because I need someone to understand that I'm not like him. I made terrible choices, but I'm not a killer. Yes, you are. Elena said, you might not have put your hands on them, but you're still responsible for their deaths. I know. His voice was barely a whisper now. That's why I can't keep living with it. The line went dead. Elena sat frozen for a moment, then ran from the tent, shouting for Agent Reeves. She found her near the main house, coordinating with other agents. Victor Mullen just called me, Elena said breathlessly. He's going to kill himself. We need to trace the call. Find him. Reeves was already pulling out her phone, barking orders to her team. Within minutes, technicians were working on tracing Mullen's call, but Elena knew it was probably too late. He'd sounded final, decided. He told me about a place, Elena continued, a clearing north of the house. He said Vernon took victims there before killing them. He called it the Garden. Reeves immediately dispatched a team to search the area. Elena followed, unable to stay behind, needing to see this last piece of her daughter's story. They found the clearing exactly where Mullen had described it, a small meadow surrounded by towering pines, carpeted with wild flowers, even in early spring. It was beautiful, peaceful, and utterly obscene. This is where he brought them, Porter said quietly, arriving beside Elena, where he made them feel safe before. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed what they already knew. The meadow was a grave site, but unlike the others, these bodies hadn't been buried deep. They were shallow. Graves, almost gentle in their placement. He wanted them to be part of the garden, one of the forensic technicians said, her voice subdued. Not hidden, incorporated. Elena knelt at the edge of the clearing, touching the soft grass. Iris had been here, had stood in this exact spot, believing she was finally being rewarded for her compliance, had maybe even smiled at the flowers, felt the sun on her face for the first time in 6 months. And then Vernon Hale had taken that moment of hope and ended her life. Mrs. Voss, Reeves approached carefully. We found Victor Mullen. Elena stood slowly. Where? His truck parked at a rest stop outside Spokane. He left a note confessing his involvement with Hale, providing details about additional victims we didn't know about. She paused. He shot himself. He's dead. Elena felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, just emptiness. In his note, Reeves continued, he asked that we tell you he was sorry for whatever that's worth. It's worth nothing, Elena said. She turned back to the clearing, to the beautiful, terrible place where her daughter had died. The sun was setting now, casting golden light across the wild flowers. Tomorrow, the forensic teams would dig here, would disturb this false peace to recover the remains. But tonight, just for a moment, Elena let herself imagine Iris seeing it as Vernon Hale had wanted her to see it, as something beautiful, a reward for being good. It was a small mercy in an ocean of horror, but it was all Elena had. The excavation of the garden clearing took 3 days. What they found confirmed the scope of Vernon Hale's depravity. 12 burial sites, all shallow, all arranged in a circular pattern like some grotesque flower bed. The forensic anthropologist called it a presentation display, each victim positioned with deliberate care. Elena remained in Ellensburg through it all, bearing witness to every discovery, every identification. Jennifer Ashford stayed too, and together they became the de facto representatives of all the families whose loved ones had been found. By the end of the first week, they'd identified 9 victims. By the second week, 14, the full count when it came was devastating. 23 victims spanning 1978 to 1998. Men, women, teenagers, children, all travelers who'd had the misfortune of crossing paths with Vernon Hale. Elena sat in the task force command center, surrounded by photographs of the dead. Each one had a name now, a family, a story that had been cut brutally short. She'd helped contact many of those families, had listened to their grief, their relief at finally knowing, their rage at the years stolen from them. Mrs. Voss, Detective Porter entered carrying a file folder. The medical examiner has completed the analysis of your daughter's remains. I thought you'd want to hear the findings privately. Elena braced herself. Go ahead. Porter sat down across from her, his expression gentle. Death was caused by asphyxiation, a most likely manual strangulation. Based on Th. E. hyoid bone damage, it was quick. Probably less than 2 minutes. She wouldn't have suffered long. 2 minutes. 120 seconds of terror and pain. It seemed both infinite and impossibly brief. Was there evidence of Elena couldn't finish the question. Sexual assault? No. None of the child victims showed signs of that type of abuse. Hale's compulsion was about control and possession, not sexual gratification. It was the smallest of mercies, but Elena clung to it. Iris had been psychologically tortured, starved, isolated, broken, but not violated in that particular way. There's something else, Porter said. We found trace evidence in the soil near your daughter's burial site. Fibers consistent with a blanket and residue from what appears to be lavender oil. Elena frowned. Lavender. We found bottles of it in Hale's house along with several handmade blankets. We believe he wrapped the victims in the blankets before burial, anointed them with the oil. It was part of his ritual, his way of showing care, I suppose, twisted as that sounds. Elena closed her eyes, picturing Vernon Hale standing over Iris's body, carefully wrapping her in a blanket as if tucking a child into bed. Smoothing lavender oil on her skin like some perverse blessing. He thought he loved them, Elena said quietly. In his own way, yes. His notebooks are full of entries describing his victims in almost reverent terms. He saw himself as their caretaker, their protector. The killing was release, not violence. At least that's how he rationalized it. He was insane. He was evil. Porter corrected. There's a difference. Hale knew exactly what he was doing. He planned meticulously, covered his tracks, maintained a facade of normalcy for decades. That's not insanity. That's calculated predation. Elena opened her eyes. When can I take her home? Iris's remains. The medical examiner will release them by the end of the week. You can make arrangements with any funeral home you choose. Home. Elena tried to imagine bringing Iris back to Whidbey Island, to the cottage where she'd lived alone for 28 years. What would she do with her daughter's bones? Where did you lay to rest a child who should have grown into a woman? There's one more thing, Porter said. He pulled a small evidence bag from the folder. Inside was a tarnished locket on a delicate chain. We found this with Iris's remains. It was inside the blanket placed directly on her chest. Elena took the bag, her hands trembling. She recognized the locket immediately. It had been Nathan's mother's, a family heirloom. Nathan had worn it sometimes, kept a tiny photograph of his parents inside. Hale took it from Nathan, Elena said, and buried it with Iris. We think so. It suggests he understood they were father and daughter, that he deliberately united them in death in his own way. Elena turned the bag over, studying the locket through the plastic. Can I open it? Porter nodded. The forensic team already processed it. Elena carefully removed the locket from the bag and pressed the tiny clasp. It opened to reveal 2 photographs just as she remembered. But they weren't the photos of Nathan's parents anymore. They were photos of Iris. One showed her smiling at the camera, the same school picture Elena had given to police when she disappeared. The other was a Polaroid. Iris in that terrible room sitting on the bed, her face blank. He replaced his parents' photos with pictures of Iris, Elena whispered, and placed it on her when he buried her. Porter finished like he was giving her back to her father. The twisted sentimentality of it made Elena's stomach turn. Vernon Hale had murdered Nathan, imprisoned and slowly destroyed Iris, then buried them with this macabre gesture of reunion. I hate him, Elena said. I hate that he's dead and beyond justice. I hate that he'll never answer for what he did. He answered, Porter said quietly. Maybe not in a courtroom, but the world knows now. Every victim has been identified. Every family notified. His crimes are exposed. His legacy is horror. That counts for something. Did it? Elena wasn't sure. The 23 families now had closure, could hold funerals, could grieve properly. But they'd also lost decades. Years they'd spent hoping, searching, not knowing, and the victims themselves. What justice was there for them? For Iris, who'd spent her last 6 months in terror. For Nathan, who died trying to help someone in need. For the teenage girls just starting their lives. The families traveling through beautiful country. All the people whose only crime had been crossing paths with a monster. Mrs. Voss. Agent Reeves entered the tent, her expression unusually animated. We finished processing Vernon Hale's financial records and found something significant. She pulled out a bank statement pointing to a series of deposits dating from 1995 to 1998. Large cash deposits, irregular intervals, amounts ranging from $500 to $3,000. We traced them back to their source. Victor Mullen, Elena guessed. No, these came from someone else. Someone Hale was blackmailing. Reeves paused. Mrs. Voss, one of Hale's victims, didn't die, at least not from his direct actions. In 1994, a woman named Patricia Fielding stopped at Hale's shop with her young son. Hale attempted to abduct them, but Patricia fought back. She managed to escape with her son, but she was terrified. Hale told her he knew where she lived, that if she went to the police, he'd come for her son. Elena's chest tightened. She stayed silent. Worse, Hale extorted her, made her pay him monthly to ensure her son's safety. The payments continued until Hale's death. Where is she now? We contacted her this morning. She lives in Bellingham with her family. She's willing to speak with you if you'd like. She said she's carried guilt for years, wondering if coming forward earlier might have saved others. Elena thought of Victor Mullen's final words, his insistence that he wasn't a killer despite his complicity. Patricia Fielding had been a victim. First, a mother protecting her child. But her silence had allowed Hale to continue, had potentially contributed to other deaths. How did you judge someone trapped between impossible choices? I'd like to meet her, Elena said finally, not to blame her, to understand. Reeves nodded. I'll arrange it. That evening, Elena stood alone in the garden clearing as the sun set. The excavation was complete, the forensic teams packing up their equipment. By tomorrow, the property would be quiet again. The investigation officially closed. She knelt and placed her hand on the earth where Iris had been buried. The soil was soft, disturbed by all the digging, but underneath she could still feel the root systems of wildflowers. Life persisting in a place of death. I'm taking you home, baby, Elena whispered. Back to the island, back to the ocean you loved. You'll never be alone in the dark again. The wind rustled through the pines, and for just a moment Elena let herself imagine it was Iris answering, finally free from Vernon Hale's terrible garden. Finally, after 28 years and 179 days, coming home. 6 months later, the memorial garden on Whidbey Island overlooked Admiralty Bay, a semicircle of native plants surrounding a simple granite bench. A small plaque was embedded in the stone in memory of Iris Eleanor Voss and Nathan James Voss. Forever in our hearts. Elena sat on the bench watching the autumn light play across the water. Beside her, Claire held her hand in comfortable silence. They came here often now, especially on difficult days. Today was Iris's birthday. She would have been 35. I wonder what she would have become, Elena said quietly. What she would have studied, who she would have loved. She would have been extraordinary, Claire replied. Just like her mother. Elena had scattered Iris's ashes here 6 months ago in a small private ceremony attended by family and a few close friends. Nathan's remains, what little had been recovered, rested here, too. Finally reunited with his daughter, not in Vernon Hale's garden, but in a place of beauty and peace. The investigation had concluded with comprehensive closure. All 23 victims identified, all families notified. The FBI had published a detailed report documenting Hale's methods, his hunting patterns, the full scope of his crimes. The property had been seized by the state and there was talk of turning it into a memorial park. Elena had testified before Congress about the importance of cross-jurisdictional cooperation in solving cold cases, had become an advocate for families of missing persons. It gave her purpose, channeled her grief into something constructive, but it didn't erase the pain. Nothing could. I met with Patricia Fielding last week. Elena said the woman Hale extorted. How did it go? Better than expected. She spent years in therapy working through the guilt. Her son is in college now studying criminal justice. He wants to help other families. That's something good coming from all this horror. Claire observed. Edition Elena nodded. They'd all found ways to transform tragedy. Jennifer Ashford had started a foundation providing support to families of cold case victims. The children of other victims had become advocates, investigators, therapists. Even Victor Mullen's daughter, who'd learned the truth about her father's complicity, now volunteered with missing persons organizations. Vernon Hale had created a legacy of pain. But his victims' families were building something else. A network of support. A community of survivors determined that no one else would suffer in silence. Elena's phone buzzed. A text from Detective Porter. Thought you'd want to know. Final count confirmed. 23 victims. All identified. All home. All home. It was the closure every family deserved. The ending she'd fought for. But for Elena, there would never be a true ending. Iris's room in the cottage remained as it had been when she was 7, a shrine to a childhood cut short. Nathan's clothes still hung in the closet. Elena had learned to live with ghosts. Are you ready? Claire asked gently. Elena stood, taking one last look at the memorial, at the water beyond. Somewhere out there, she imagined Nathan and Iris existed in some form. Not as the broken remains found in Hale's terrible garden, but as they'd been in that last photograph, smiling beside the silver Honda on a Saturday morning full of promise. I'm ready, Elena said. They walked back to the cottage together, past Elena's carefully tended garden where she grew lavender. Now. Not the variety Hale had used, but a different strain, reclaiming the scent from his darkness. Inside, the cottage was warm, lived in, safe. Elena had transformed it from a mausoleum of grief into something resembling a home again. There were photographs on every surface, not just of Iris and Nathan, but of Claire's family, friends, the life Elena was slowly rebuilding. On the mantel sat a framed copy of Iris's diary entry from September 20th. My name is Iris Eleanor Voss. I won't forget. And Elena hadn't forgotten, would never forget. But she'd learned to carry the memory differently, not as a weight that crushed her, but as a light that guided her forward. Her daughter had been loved, had fought to hold on to herself even in the darkest circumstances, had left behind words that helped solve not just her own disappearance, but 22 others. That was Iris's legacy. Not the 179 days of captivity, but the strength she'd shown, the identity she'd refused to surrender, the truth she'd preserved. As the sun set over Admiralty Bay, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Iris's favorite color, Elena stood at the window and whispered the words she said every night. Good night, baby. Good night, Nathan. You're home now. You're finally home. And in the gentle twilight with the sound of waves against the shore, Elena could almost believe they heard,